Big Conversations, Little Bar, with your hosts Randy Florence and Patrick Evans, featuring candid conversations with the Coachella Valley's most interesting and influential people. Pull up a bar stool and enjoy Big Conversations, Little Bar.
Welcome to another edition of Big Conversation, Little Bar. I'm Patrick Evans here with my co-host Randy Florence.
Welcome.
26 episodes in and we're still not getting better.
No, we are better because usually I say welcome at the end.
That's true.
So I've improved significantly.
We've reached a certain point where we've called it a season. We've had 26 episodes.
That is unbelievable.
Big conversations. And as my father said, there are no small conversations, just small conversationalists. And now I know what he meant. We are going to spend the next few minutes talking a little bit about the past season and some of our favorite guests. Randy's going to mention some of his least favorite guests, which I think is rude, but that's what he's going to do.
Host. Least favorite host.
Least favorite host.
That's going to be part of the conversation.
Okay. And we'll also get give a little opportunity to get to know one another a little better, just to converse with each other. So maybe folks of you out in the audience who listen to this and don't know who either one of us is, we might be able to shed some light on that. So
let's talk a little bit about how we put this together. Here in the center of the Coachella Valley Universe.
As I recall, through the hazy fog of Little Bar, it was over cheeseburgers and drinks. And I believe it was after tasting mezcal for the first time that you thought, wow, this is going to be a great idea.
Yeah. So I'm driving in thinking about a podcast idea. And the only thing it took to germinate was a couple of beers and those cheeseburgers. And
Skip saying yes, we should say once again how appreciative we are of Skip Paige here at Little Bar, who has hosted us this entire season.
Is Skip saying you are going to do a podcast and you're going to do it over there the same as Skip saying yes?
No, he didn't say you were going to do a podcast. He said, that's a great idea. I've always wanted to do a podcast, but I don't have the time. You guys... And I said, what if we do it here? And he said, that's a great idea. You can do it over at that corner.
That's right.
So it worked out very well, I think, for all involved.
It did for me because I get to hang out in a bar every week.
The nice thing is we're all losing about the same amount of money throughout the entire process. And, of course, the season would not have been possible without John McMullen, who has been instrumental in not only engineering each of our podcasts, but also making sure that they get up on the appropriate platforms. And, John shared with us some listenership numbers that I found really impressive for a newbie podcast. And well, you've had experience doing podcasts. You did one.
Not a good one. So this one's been a different experience for me.
It was your take two.
We actually have listeners for this one. Talk about that.
We do. We have, and they're listening now, hopefully. One of the things that I found really gratifying is not just kind of the number of listeners we've generated, but also, and I think this is a very important number, most of the people who listen to damn near the whole thing. Which is
I don't even listen
to
the whole thing. So it amazes me that people do. What do we have? The average listener was listening for 46 minutes.
Yes, and our average podcast length is 12. So I don't know what they're listening to.
Well, they have to listen to it multiple times to get it. What did they say?
So, looking back, we've had a really impressive roster of first season guests. And I want to start by saying, once again, Skip Paige just really set the bar very, very high. Great stories about not only how the big music festivals came about, but how he got involved in that in the first place. Fascinating guy.
Yeah, and it meant something to him when he was talking about his partner, Paul, and Tollette. You could kind of feel what that all meant to Skip. And just being in this bar, you can tell what it means to him. Yeah, I'm thrilled to be doing this, and I'm really excited he let us do it here.
Oh, absolutely. Well, there are any number of podcasts, some of which originate right here in the Coachella Valley, but none from Little Bar. It makes it special. There's a podcast out there, and this blew me away. I just heard an advertisement for it. And Jason Alexander of Seinfeld fame is now doing a podcast based on Mel Haber's book, Bedtime Tales from the Ingleside Inn. I don't think he ever met Mel. Like, how did that guy get that guy? I knew Mel very well.
Yeah.
I'm like, he's George. George was never. Kramer might have been. at the Ingleside Inn, but George was never there.
Have you listened to it?
No.
No. Well, if he hasn't talked to us, he's not really doing anything about Coachella Valley.
One of my other favorite guests came early on in the season, and that was Judith Chapman, who dropped a bombshell that I've known her for years, and great soap opera actress and also a great director of local plays. But she was up for the part of Princess Leia in Star Wars.
The look on your face when she said that was pretty awesome.
Personally interviewed, flown in for the interview by George Lucas himself.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's very crazy. I think throughout the 26 episodes, it's always looked like you enjoyed yourself. But the moments where you got most excited was at some random mention of Star Trek.
Well, that was Star Wars, but yes, I like it.
Well, that's true.
There are two different franchises. You know that, right?
I do not know that. Should I go back and look at some of the movies?
No, don't bother. Just rewatch Everything Everywhere All at Once, and you'll be fine.
But I find it interesting how many of the people that we talked to at some point made a reference related to Star Trek somehow or the other.
I mean, there's really that franchise has been around for nearly 60 years, 57 years this year. Mm-hmm. So there's 60. I mean, almost all of us has had a chance to guest star in an episode. So
I played a Tribble in 1968.
There's like 2 degrees of separation. But one of the people that we had on was Fred Bronson, who wrote 3 different episodes of Star Trek.
Right.
And was the publicist for the animated series. So that was very cool.
I loved some of the things he talked about early on, too. The other thing that has been a common thread throughout this is the number of crushes that I hear about throughout these. And Fred dated Connie Stevens.
No.
Well, they went to lunch. He won a contest.
But he was 11.
That was translated into my head as though Randy, at 19 years old, had gone out with Connie Stevens.
Right, because you had a crush on Connie Stevens?
Big time.
Well, you could enter the same contest. I think they run it every year. Maybe you'll get lunch with her.
It's not going to be very interesting for either one of us.
What were some of your highlights? And I know Bruce Fessier, because you had him on your original podcast.
Yeah.
And you were champing at the bit to get him back in here. Yeah. And, I mean, Bruce should do a podcast of his own.
No doubt.
Because he's encyclopedic in his knowledge of what has happened in this desert. We've
had the good fortune of having some people on the show who really have been here since the beginning and have been writing about it since the beginning, and Bruce being one of those. I am so fascinated, and this came out in the old podcast that I did too, but I'm so fascinated by the underbelly of the mob that exists here. And every one of them wants to talk about it somehow or the other.
Does the mob have an underbelly, or is it the underbelly of society?
It is the underbelly.
And it was made up by, Caucasian people to keep the Italians down. That's the way I feel about it. It's a totally artificial thing that you guys made up.
So you're saying it doesn't exist?
That's what I'm saying. But Todd Goldberg, whom you brought on board as a guest, and I still think this is a good idea. We need to get Todd and Bruce together to do, because they know more about the supposed mob here in the Coachella Valley.
They do. Well, Todd's stories, I mean, first of all, if you haven't read Todd's books,
Gangster Stories.
I would really recommend The Low Desert also. It's a series of short stories about the desert, but you'll recognize all of the places. You'll even recognize perhaps a clown who's in a rearview mirror.
Never mentioned by name.
Nope, never mentioned by name, but we all freaking know who Todd's talking about.
Who is also going to be a guest on the podcast, I feel certain.
It will be. It'll be a quiet hour. But I remember Todd started talking about his mom, Jan Curran, who had been the society writer for the Desert Sun for years and years and years. And Todd talked about sometimes he'd come home and there'd be one of her dates, and the date would go, "What size shoe do you wear?" Take him out and open up the trunk, and Todd would end up with some new spats or something for the day. So we have people that, while they also talk about that underbelly, they've apparently made out pretty well because of it also. I mean, Todd and his mom dressed very well.
Well,
because
Todd
of their
always said that he couldn't figure out how his mom was always so well dressed for the galas she covered on a newspaper salary. And then he finally, as he got older, realized, Oh, it's the boy she's dating.
Yeah. You know, Todd opened up a can of worms, too, talking about a character that I had never heard of in the Valley called the Tan Man.
Oh, the Tan Man, that's right.
And he worked for the Tan Man. And as a matter of fact, I saw later that Brian Blue Sky had actually Googled it and found an article about the Tan Man. But the Tan Man was Todd's employer who helped him sell and then rip off people who stayed at the hotel.
Yeah, he basically set up shop at a hotel, sold tan lotion, and then they would grab the bottles after they got drunk and fell asleep and resell them, fill them up and sell them again. But he never really, the Tan Man didn't work for any of these hotels. He would just show up,
and I think
make a few
ended
bucks.
up, he owed Todd $165 or something like that by the end
Todd
of
is
it.
still mad about it.
He is mad. That was a big part of the podcast.
You brought up another very interesting guest, Brian Blue Sky, who is also a gentleman that you've known. Brian, we've met a couple times, but got to know him better on the podcast. No one knows more about indie music and the music scene than Brian Blue. I mean, he's forgotten more than I'll ever learn about that kind of music.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
More than I want to, but that's beside the point.
Well, we have had some experiences here, as I mentioned. While I may be significantly older than you, musically I'm about 20 years younger.
At least.
So I know there's been things, including conversations around emo music and stuff like that I've been able to help you
I still
with.
don't know what that is, but I did really enjoy how Brian could really talk about, taking deep dives into the festival lineups, particularly Coachella's lineups, over the years, because they've really changed. You know, when you still get some headliners that you recognize, but fewer and farther between. This is how music is changing and how these festivals are changing, and it means something to Brian and a group of people that go to this festival. Yeah,
this year we got to see the best of writing about Coachella. I think we saw Brian, who did a fantastic job at what's the local paper called?
It's the Desert
Sun.
Has been for a very long time. It's not really local. It's published in Phoenix. I don't want to rub that in there. I don't want to point that out, other than just to point it out. It's not really a local paper.
Well,
but
we have a big market.
We all enjoy USA Today and all of the articles they publish in the local paper from Phoenix.
Got a little off topic there. But between him and what Bruce Fessier has been writing nonstop on his Facebook page, he did some fantastic stuff on Coachella. I'm really surprised you and I didn't write anything. We had a pretty interesting experience.
An incredible 90 minutes.
35-minute experience at Coachella.
The bus ride was longer than my experience at Coachella.
Was that the first time you've ever been high?
I was just a contact high. Because I was standing next to you, I don't mind pointing out, my good friend.
It's amazing what you can get into the festival with. A 9-foot bong.
Actually,
but you can't bring in a bottle of water.
I was frisked and told if I didn't take pot in, I would be asked to leave.
All you had to do was use the words you just used, and they would not have frisked you. If you said, I don't have pot, they would go, we believe you.
But nobody calls it pot. Weed? Is weed the accepted term?
Or reefer.
No one says reefer anymore. No one says. All right. Fred Bell had the funniest story, I think, of any of our guests when he was attacked and nearly killed by a penguin at SeaWorld.
Yeah. I didn't really. I had met Fred. All I really knew of him is he seems like one of the happiest guys in the Valley from watching his Facebook page. But when he went into that story, I don't think I stopped laughing for about a day and a half.
I had heard that story, and it doesn't get older with the telling. It just gets better.
Nah, you definitely want to listen to the story of the emperor penguin, the murder penguins.
The murder
penguins, yeah.
Our first husband and wife couple was Melissa Niederman and her husband, Tim Gross, who is the touring keyboardist for Bruce No. I just did it again. Bruce Springfield.
An emo guy. No, Rick Springfield.
That's him.
Yeah, very good.
John, we're going to edit that out and clean it up.
No.
Rick Springfield, who's, by the way, is coming to town.
He'll be here in December, and apparently on the birthday of
Melissa
Niederman, who was on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was our first episode with a couple.
Yes.
But we subsequently did that again with Lisa Bossler and Philip Smith. And I was actually surprised when they told us that it was the first time anybody had ever thought to interview the two of them together. I think we're onto something here.
Well, that was pretty remarkable because they're both incredibly accomplished people and they have a lot of history in them. I'm surprised, but I guess also not. I mean, you can get a great podcast out of either one of them. But having them together, I thought, was really a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, and I think pretty clearly this is the podcast that people want to be on. So,
you enjoy inviting guests on from the local paper that's published in Phoenix, and one of my favorites of that particular ilk was Larry Bohannon, who's been a buddy of mine for many years. My first wife worked at the paper, and I got to know Larry, so this is going back nearly 20 years. And Larry has so many great stories, but he tells them in this kind of subtly self-deprecating way that makes them very entertaining.
And you don't really pick up on it until a couple of minutes after he's finished.
It's like, that was really funny, Larry.
The timing of having him on was really interesting, too, because it was right in the middle of that whole PGA live golf thing. Mm-hmm. And we got some really good explanation from Larry about what he thought was going to happen there. I actually am really interested in doing a follow-up with him because things kind of blew up on that story not too long after we were on. You know, the other thing that we haven't really talked about here, and I think everybody in the Valley needs to know about this if you're writing a book or putting out a record or doing anything new, virtually everybody that's come on here has kind of blown up right after their appearance on here. Sean
LaBelle, he was, I think, our second guest. He's a friend of mine. He produces television commercials, but he's a smooth jazz star, and his current hit, Feel the Breeze, is still charting on Sirius XM. What is there? Oh, is it Watercolors? What's the jazz station, John?
I think it is Watercolors.
John, I don't know.
Sounds like, is that emo?
It's emo. No, but Sean, Sean has a long history in the jazz business, but his solo work, I think he's really kind of focused on in the last couple of years. He's got another single coming in off of the album, and he had such good results with Feel the Breeze. They're very excited about his next single. So
yeah, well,
and he sent it to me. I'm not allowed to talk about it or play it, but it's really good. It's really good.
I remember the other guest too. We're doing this in a bar, right? And so Skip has been very nice with some of the guests and ourselves, and every once in a while somebody ends up with a drink here. And a lot of times you'll hear them being made in the background, which I think adds to the ambience of the show. But one of our guests, I thought it was really cool, and I won't mention this one by name, but as we often do, we started out at the pre-interview, which basically is what kind of drink do you want, asking if there's anything we shouldn't talk about. And the guest said, well, I'm writing a book, but I don't want to talk about it. And we were really good. We said, great. First question out of my mouth was, how's retirement going? Well, I'm writing a book.
Yeah.
And him and one of our guests, Vince Battaglia, both said, maybe I shouldn't have had those drinks before we got started.
But I would totally disagree with that because we got better information.
Oh, we got such great stuff.
I mean, certainly, and our host, Skip, always says, I want more edgier guests.
Yeah.
Which is why we had Fred Bronson on. No, I'm kidding. Fred, and I love Fred, and I know that he listens. He may be the least edgy person I know, but he had great stories. But Vince was certainly our edgiest guest.
That was our first Not Safe for Work podcast.
He did drop a few F-bombs.
Yeah.
But you know what I found really fascinating about Vince? First of all, just the sheer, unabashed honesty. Right. Well, Vince is clearly a guy who doesn't really owe anybody anything.
He's pretty comfortable with who he is.
Yes, he is. And he'll just come out and tell you who he likes and who he doesn't like. No walking a fine line. So certainly enjoyed having Vince on. We should have Vince on again. I mean, he's a fascinating guy. And like his family story, the family immigrating from Italy and how that all came about. It's a go back and listen to that one, folks. That's a good one.
We've got some really good stories. We had we also had a guest on here. It was a really unique experience. The gentleman you invited on the show, Bill Geddie. want to talk about that a little bit.
Bill Geddie certainly stands out in our first season. I think head and shoulders above our other guests only because it was Bill's last interview, full-length interview. Bill died very suddenly shortly after recording that with us, which was a shock. I'd been friends with Bill for many years. We played golf a few times. I've been to his house. Bill, of course, was the creator of The View, co-creator with Barbara Walters, but he produced Barbara Walters specials. He was as big a wig as you get in bigwig TV without maybe heading a network or being a nightly news anchor.
Yeah, not to put down to any of our other guests, but I think it's
not
pretty
at all.
easy to say Bill is easily the most influential guest that we had on the podcast.
I think from a pop culture standpoint, that's probably true because the View is still on the air and still interesting and sometimes controversial. And you're always kind of waiting for it to blow up. You know, like the combination of personalities seems just on the verge. But that's how he kind of planned it, and that's, you know, how Barbara Walters wanted it. But the fact that we had the opportunity to sit down with him, and he and I were, the Tuesday before he died, we were discussing, he was talking about the state of television and maybe that the networks are for sale and there's going to be something wholly different coming up. And he said, I've got really, really interesting information about that, and I want to talk with you guys again about it. We were planning another podcast, and so, I mean, now he's gone. So we were just so lucky to have that moment in time with Bill Geddie.
Yeah, I feel really lucky. I mean, I know you were friends and you'd known Bill for a while, but I felt his presence when he walked in the room, and it stayed that way until he walked out of the room.
You know, he was a big guy. I mean, he's tall and substantial, but his presence was more than just his physical presence. You know, he's one of those people where when he walks in the room, you're pretty assured that's probably the smartest guy in the room.
There's no doubt about it. Well, the second I started talking, I knew that I wasn't, so it worked out well. You know, we've also had a couple of local people on that I think we can take full credit. You know, Brooke Bear, an old friend of yours. Barry, an old friend of yours.
I know that you've gotten to know her well through our
apparently not as well as I thought I did. But before, I mean, look what's happened since she was on the podcast. She got a fantastic new job. She's been in a movie.
All of that, by the way, happened before she appeared on the podcast.
God, you're just screwing the whole thing up here. We are singularly responsible.
We're going to take responsibility
for Brooke Berry's success.
No, and her film was it's a short film, and every time I talk about it, the name escapes me, but it was written by Carolyn Milashko, who was a producer for CBS Local 2, produced Eye on the Desert for many years. She wrote the script, and Brooke started it. Melissa Niederman had a role in it. It was produced by Palm Springs Women in Film and Television, and it was screened at the LA Film Festival and did very well. And it's about a woman who loses a child, and it's a really difficult topic, and they tackle it in a 20-minute film in this beautiful way.
Yeah, and it goes from beginning to end. It's like you've watched a 2.5-hour film.
Yeah.
By the time you're done with it. Yeah. And the Melissa Niederman was involved with that one also.
She co-stars.
Yep.
As well as helped, I think, do some of the producing behind the scenes. So.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the fact that the Palm Springs women's film. I don't know.
Palm Springs Women in Film and Television. You're good with names. Let's talk about
Scott White. I can't do anything that starts with Palm Springs. Anyway, we are one of our future guests is going to be Kim Waltrip.
Looking forward.
Really looking forward.
She's the head of the board at P-Swift. You can just say P-Swift.
P-Swift.
There you go. But
I'm a Swiftie.
She was instrumental in helping create the Filmmakers Lab, which is where that movie came from. The Splendor of You.
That's
the name of the film. The Splendor of You. And they're going to do a lot more of that sort of thing because Kim has made movies and really interesting films that have been at many film festivals. So what she's bringing is the idea that you just get everybody involved and make a short so everybody sees how it's done, what to do. They get to try on different hats and do different jobs so that when they go apply for a job in Hollywood, they can say, no, I did this. So,
you know, it's interesting. We've got a couple of folks like that in town. I know Todd Goldberg, who we talked about earlier, runs the MFA program at UC Riverside for writers, and their entire goal is not to teach you how to write; it's to teach you how to get published.
That's right. No, he told us this, and I think that's a really fascinating take on it, because you can go to a lot of places and the professors are very ethereal and express yourself and da-da-da. No, their goal is we're going to get you published, and we're going to teach you how to make money from the artwork that you're doing.
That would be nice.
Wouldn't that be lovely?
As we do a podcast. You know, one of the other guests that you invited.
But I wouldn't call this artwork, except on rare moments when it soars, thanks to our guests.
Kind of with crayons. One of the folks you had on here that really turned out to be some of the most fun I had the whole time was Terry Ray. And he told just some unbelievable stories, including seeing Batman.
In his skivvies.
In his Tighty Whiteys.
Yeah.
Tell us about Terry a little bit.
Well, Terry is a character actor. I think he would accept that title. And he's probably one of the most famous actors that you may not know, but you've seen him in a million different things. Yeah. He's prolific. But I got to know him because he wrote a play loosely based on his experiences growing up as a closeted gay guy in kind of rural Ohio called Electricity. And it's a terrific play, and it may eventually make its way to Broadway. They were really close to that when COVID hit. So, and it's a fascinating look at coming out and dealing with being gay in a place that maybe is not as accepting. We live in the bubble of the Coachella Valley where, who cares?
Right.
Right, John?
Sounds like I don't care.
John's like,
what are we talking about?
I'm not even sure I care about this conversation. But Terry is a playwright and a screenwriter. He's got this wildly entertaining YouTube
channel thing. His TV therapy, is that the name of it?
Yeah, and he gets
Isaac, the bartender.
Yeah, from the Love Boat on, and they all appear as their character.
Right.
And they
Tabitha from Bewitched.
And they all talk about, the issues that, like, he was like, yeah, well, I'm a bartender on a boat, and everybody's hooking up except me, except I did get to hook up with Marion Ross. And like, whoa, what? It wasn't Marion Ross. I'm kidding about that.
Too bad. I had a crush on her, too.
No, it was Julie, the cruise director.
Yeah.
And Terry put it together like, Isaac wasn't kidding. Like, apparently the two actors had a little fun. But that's what Terry was terrific. But he runs the
Actors Lab.
Actors Lab.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I think it is. Something like that. He's teaching acting.
He's teaching acting, and it's a very famous franchise. But
and he had the longest running play.
Electricity was it.
In Palm Springs.
And he's a very, very gifted teacher of acting as well. So if you want to take some acting classes, reach out to Terry Ray. Plus, he started The Bent, which is now the only LGBTQ theater company in the Valley.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's doing a lot of really interesting stuff.
Yeah, you want to listen to that one. That was fun. He also talks about getting fired by a dog.
He was fired by a dog. That's correct. So was David Hasselhoff by the same dog, but wouldn't admit it.
He wouldn't admit it. And you'd think after everything David's been through, there wouldn't really be anything that he'd be afraid to admit.
And I'm not allowed to say this, but David Hasselhoff was a client of my wife's. Shh, I'm not allowed to say that.
Hey, we've also been...
Somebody else told me. My wife didn't tell me that.
What's also amazed me about this is the number of people that have said yes when we've asked them. We've had some some local influencers.
Well, one of the biggest gets, I think, and I think it's really thanks to John, was Gary Keefe.
Yeah.
Who is taking over the board of the McCallum Theater, but runs Stiletto Entertainment, and really was the godfather of merch.
Yep. Wasn't that a great story?
Merch didn't really exist for music acts, and really networks. And like, he created the merch for ABC.
Yeah.
Kind of by accident.
Yes.
And then he got kind of stuck doing it. Rod Stewart wanted to do his merch, wanted him to do the merch. He's like, I don't want to deal with it. Here, I'm just going to write you a check. You deal with the merch. And send me the royalties.
No, he was responsible for starting musicals on cruise ships.
That's right.
And Gary Keefe
he and his husband
who some people might have heard of.
He is, I think, recognizable in a certain genre. Barry Manilow.
Barry Manilow. Oh, is it Barry Manilow is his husband?
Yeah, it was funny. And I think you and I were pretty good about this, but we, of course, know that Gary is married to Barry Manilow. Neither one of us wanted to bring it up during the course of the podcast because we're here to interview Gary.
We want to know about Gary.
But within about 3 minutes, he kept referencing Barry, and he never said Barry Manilow, and he never said my husband. He just would throw out Barry, and we just nod. And finally, I was like, okay, I need to address this.
Yeah, the Barry in the room.
The Barry in the room. and then it was funny because Gary kind of nodded, he's like, "Isn't that why you guys had me?" I'm like, "No, that is not." But
yeah. By the way, for all of you who have a very famous partner or spouse, we'd love to interview you. We don't need to talk to the partner and spouse until the second.
But we will need some interesting dirt.
We do have to get good stories. Another local influencer who probably had one of the best years of anybody in the Valley was the general manager of Acrisure Arena, John Bolton. This was a huge year for them.
Well, first year, huge year, an enormous impact. And I will be honest, when...
Please, what episode is this? 25?
Feels like about 40 now.
Patrick's going to be honest. Go ahead.
I'm going to be honest for the first... No. First of all, they announced they were building an arena, and first it was going to be in downtown Palm Springs, and that was a terrible idea. Mm-hmm. And then they said, no, we're going to put it here, and we're going to build it. It's going to be up in 2 years and up and running. And I've been around the Valley for 20-plus years. I have seen a lot of people come in and make very grandiose plans and statements. Every word of what they said was true.
Everyone.
They brought it to fruition on schedule, and it became, I think, one of the biggest cultural influences in the Valley in its first year. There's Firebird fever in this town. People have embraced the hockey team, but when you have an auditorium that seats 12,000 people, you get a different kind of act than we've been seeing. And I mean, Harry Styles shows up to town
on his birthday on the final tour.
Harry Styles' birthday, Lizzo. We've got Madonna coming to town. These are acts that would not have stopped here were it not for this arena.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been. I think it's going to be one of the most important things that help the growth of this community. And you're right. We've seen so many of these things come. I mean, what was it, 5 years ago that we had a company talking about opening up a, they were going to turn the Sam's Club in La Quinta into an arena. And they had already apparently set up Snoop Dogg as the first guest. I'm not sure exactly who that company, it rhymes with Raxony.
Yes.
Saxony. Remember all the billboards up and down?
Flash in the pan.
Oh, man, were they.
No, but, and I was delighted to see that the Oakview Group was really committed to doing this. And obviously they connected with a local family that means a lot to hockey and is involved. And so, but what they've done to kind of change the face of entertainment, and I think the interesting thing to me is they don't really compete with the other entertainment venues. And we were talking about Gary Keefe who's taken over the McCallum. That still has its niche. I mean, people who come to Acrisure aren't going to play the McCallum anyway, and vice versa.
That's right.
So it only adds to the cultural distinctiveness of this incredible valley.
Yeah, I think a lot of the naysayers when this originally come in, who again were probably people that were just used to over the years, these grifters coming in and out of the valley. But
Grifters and carpetbaggers.
I think the two things that they didn't think about was the influence of the Northwest visitors that we have every year who love hockey, and they loved our hockey team.
You fell in love with the hockey.
Oh, I did right away.
You're the reason that I went. Every hockey game I attended was with you.
Wasn't it fun?
It's super fun.
Yeah. But also, I don't think we really understood how the ownership of that place was going to put acts into that arena that people were going to want to see.
Well, that's the thing. It's like they're tied into such a, I mean, the ticketing of these big acts and the touring of these big acts, it's all a giant machine.
Yeah.
And when you put a venue like that in a place, now the company that is putting all of these tours together can leverage the act to say, by the way, we have an arena here in the Palm Springs area, and we need you to play a date there. And they do.
Yeah.
And so it's great for the Valley. It's amazing. Have you gotten your tickets from Madonna?
I have not. Have you?
I can't afford a ticket. We need to talk about John. Talk to John.
I'm
Bolton.
retired. Yeah, we'll talk to John Bolton. I haven't seen any tickets since we had John Bolton on here. We might have to talk to him about that.
Not that we are trying to leverage.
No.
The podcast
We would not do that. What date is Stagecoach this year, Skip? I want to shift gears a little bit here. We're going to be 26 episodes into this thing when we finish our first season, and we're already booked up through September. So this thing has turned out to be, I think,
we're doing more? Was there a memo?
I am.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We're interviewing.
Good luck.
This thing's come a long way since we sat there at that bar. Could you anticipate, how long have you been in town now? 21 years?
21 years.
And by the way, congratulations, 21 years at KESQ. That just came out. I don't know what day this is or month or year, but
most of the people listening
at some point you will have celebrated your 21st
It occurs on August the 23rd every year, and which, by the way, quite oddly, is the same day that I met my wife.
Really?
August the 23rd, 9 years ago.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So that August 23rd turns out to be a pretty good date.
That's a really good date.
In my world.
A lucky date for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not so much for her.
The show is going live, by the way, on the 28th of August.
Okay, so 5 days ago.
5 days ago.
When the show goes live.
But I guess my question is, where you are right now.
In the corner of a booth
in
at
the
Skip's
corner
bar.
of a bar at Skip's Bar. Mm-hmm. Corner of the booth at Skip's Bar, doing a podcast, 21 years into your career here in the Valley. Is sitting here with me really the highlight?
John certainly has made this so much fun. I mean, I just really...
But was there a plan B?
Now, don't ask me about my family. Don't you dare.
So one of the things that has happened on the podcast, and not that if you've listened to 2 episodes, you've missed some of it, is just the difference in professionalism and quality between somebody who's actually done this and somebody who hasn't. When Patrick and I started, it was starting out pretty even as to who was going to start the show and who was going to end the show. But we were 2 weeks into it when we realized it was a mistake to have me doing either the intro or the outro.
Well, that's, I think, by the way, I think that by design, the concept of having, your background is banking, so you've stolen money all your life, and then you were the chairman of the Palm Springs Chamber of Commerce. Just having people from different backgrounds do this, you bring a very different perspective. And that's, I think, the fun of it. And then setting it at a local bar that people love.
Yeah. Well, I describe it a lot of times to people as though... And
I'm kidding. I don't think bankers are thieves. That was a joke.
Well, most of them were.
A lot of the guys you work with.
Yeah, most of them that I knew. I was going to be a...
You were a reluctant banker.
I was a reluctant banker. I needed a paycheck.
But you were good at it. You did it for 40-plus years.
Isn't that shocking?
So at some point you must have enjoyed the banking aspect of it.
I enjoyed the people part of the business.
Right.
I was good at marketing. I was good at training. I was good at leading groups. But I don't think any of that was specific to the banking business. I think wherever I had ended up, those skills were inherent.
Well, you started in insurance, and you moved to banking, and you found a niche there, and you were very, very successful.
Well, I got married in 1981 and quickly realized. But, my wife has never spent more money than she thinks I can earn. And her belief in how much I've been able to earn has been a confidence booster for me, to be honest with you.
My wife spends more money than I can earn on a regular basis. Luckily, she can earn more money.
But we talked about how kind of the roles developed a little bit into this thing where, I mean, there's nobody more professional behind a microphone than you are. You literally can come in here and we can be talking to a guest for an hour that you've done no notes on.
No, but I can look over and read your notes, and you take meticulous notes, which I greatly appreciate.
Well, I come into this more from, like, the fan. That's why I ask these goofy questions, like, was there a plan
Was there a plan B?
You know, did your parents appreciate what you were doing when you grew up? I come at it from that different angle, and I think we kind of cover it from a couple of different sides, which makes this even more interesting.
Well, I think, you know, honestly, when you're doing a podcast, which was something I thought about, but sort of like Skip, I didn't want to put into all the work that goes into doing it. And
you were clear about that.
I did, and I remain, I think, clear about that. Look, I know how to sit down, put a headphone on, and record something, but I obviously don't have any idea how you take that recording and then get it where it needs to go to get the kind of listenership that we've enjoyed in this freshman season. But John McMullen did, and he's done a fabulous job.
He has. But you know enough not to finish off the episode by welcoming people.
Welcoming people at the end of the show is something we learn early on in broadcasting, not to do. I'll tell you, look, everybody who gets behind a microphone, eventually you're going to say something stupid. And one time I did a show called Live at 5. It was very much like Eye on the Desert. And I had a barbershop quartet group in. And the reason that they were in is they were having a big convention in honor of their 25th anniversary. First question I asked them is, so long, how long have you guys been doing this? And the guy looked at me, like, for 25 years, Patrick. So, you know, it just...
Did you realize?
Yeah, and I should have asked, my follow-up question should have been, and how many people are in your quartet? Because that would have been the right follow-up. I didn't do that. But, no, you know, you learn by doing. And you know, I've been doing television and radio here in the Coachella Valley for 21 years. But I've been on the air since 1988.
Yeah. Why do you think this podcast is having the impact? And it clearly is. People who are listening to it, both of them really have enjoyed the podcast. Why do you
One of them is John, and I don't know that he enjoys it.
And my wife. Well, no, my wife hasn't listened to any of them.
Andrew's listened to 5 minutes of every podcast we've done.
As soon as they introduce you and me, she clicks it off. Why do you think people have said yes when we're asking them to be on this silly thing?
Well, first of all, I think the allure that we don't do it in a sterile studio. Doing it here at Skip's has a certain cachet and appeal. You're a friendly face. I think I'm a friendly face. Like, it's not coming on 60 Minutes. No one feels like Mike Wallace just asked him to sit down.
Yeah.
You know, because then you know you're going to be indicted.
Yes.
So for us.
If Bruce Fessier sits down in front of you.
If Bruce calls you to be on his podcast, don't. Or get a lawyer first. And if you need a lawyer, call my wife. SLKFamilyLaw.com. Let's go. We need another sponsor.
Wow.
It should be them.
Yeah, but they're all free. Some of them are going to have to start paying at some point.
That's true.
Yeah.
No, I think, first of all, we're friendly. I mean, you ran the Chamber of Commerce for a year, but people knew you in the community. You've done a lot of work around the community. We're not here to beat anybody up. We didn't even ask Scott White where he put all the money. We didn't ask him that.
It took me 45 minutes to figure out where he worked.
You didn't know where he worked, so what would you know to ask him? You just asked him, is there a plan B? And then you said, welcome,
should be starting
and the show was over.
Yeah.
No, I think, but I would say the reason that we have the listenership that we've enjoyed is the quality of guests that we've invited on the program. I think those people share their experience on this, and everybody I think has had fun. We had just had Sue Cameron on, and Sue Cameron was at the Hollywood Reporter, and she knows more about big celebrities than any of us ever will.
Yeah.
Because they trusted her she wasn't just a writer for the Hollywood Reporter. She became a confidant and a friend. And you listen to those stories, but she had fun being here, and we have fun being here. And I think that
it comes across.
She shares it with her friends, so all of our listeners have passed it around and said, actually, this was kind of fun. Maybe you should listen to it. So I think we're just very lucky to have the quality of guests that we do.
I think so too. And just looking at what we've got coming ahead. In the second season, we've already booked a number of great guests. I know we're
tease it a little. Who have we got coming on?
Well, we've got
Randy?
some. Let's see. We have another big writer from the Valley. Maggie Downs is going to be joining us.
Maggie Downs was also at the local paper published in Phoenix for many, many years.
What's the name of the local paper?
It's the Desert Sun.
The Desert Sun. Michael Childers.
World famous photographer who's photographed every celebrity that you've. Any picture that you remember, he took it.
Yeah.
But he's also John Schlesinger's partner.
That's right.
Incredible filmmaker. And
Kim Waltrip, speaking of filmmaking, will be joining us. One of our favorite shows in the first season was a gentleman named Brad Parker. And Brad, who's just been around the music business since the 60s, told some incredible stories. But Brad is married to, I think, somebody who's going to be a fascinating podcast, Deb Greco. Deb, for most of her life, has been known as one of the most influential veterinarians in the entire world. And a few years ago decided she wanted to become one of the most influential ukulele players in the world.
She was here with her husband and she's one of the most unique individuals. That is going to be a really interesting, and you can get a second opinion about your situation for her.
Yeah, I think so too. So who else do you want to have on here? Lisa Lynn.
We're going to have Karen Devine.
Karen Devine. Lisa Lynn from the Broken Hallelujahs.
Lisa Lynn Morgan, who also is one of the most influential musicians. She plays, they can scale up or scale down.
Yeah.
The Broken Hallelujahs can be 3 people or I think 8.
Yeah.
And they lean country, but they can play anything. They're a really experienced group of musicians, but Lisa Lynn leads that group, and she's remarkably talented, but also has just one of the most amazing giving hearts in the Valley. She plays at a lot of charity events and just donates her time to do that.
And she's going to talk a lot about, as Brad did, the music scene up in Joshua Tree.
Well, she's part of the publishing group that does Joshua Tree Voice.
Right.
Along with Ray Rodriguez.
Yes. Yep.
Who also would be a fascinating guest.
He probably would be. Big conversations at Casuelos Cafe.
Yeah, he'd come over here.
Or would he?
Yeah,
I bet he would. It's a bar.
He might bring tamales for us, but he'd come over here.
Hey, Rosie Casals, how cool is that going to be? I thought 4 or 5, 6-time Wimbledon doubles winner with Billie Jean King.
But more importantly, a founding member of the WTA.
Yes.
A member of the Tennis Hall of Fame, not once but twice, for her role.
And she has been teaching tennis to youth here in the Valley, and we're going to talk about some of that. And then Ron Oliver.
Ron Oliver is one of my most favorite people in this Valley. I don't see him often enough. He's a filmmaker and a screenwriter. He works very closely. He's a magician. That's how he got started. And he holds true to his magician roots. And is a proud member over at the Magic Castle in L.A.
And we may have some interesting conversations about the writer's strike.
Well, I think we will. I mean, it still is ongoing, and there are going to be guests coming up. Certainly he will be here before the strike is resolved.
Yeah. And we just confirmed today another couple that are going to be here, Grant and Lisa Feuer. Grant, the Hall of Fame hockey player,
yes,
and
indeed, he was a
one of the announcers of the Firebirds game.
And one of the, and I think he'll talk about this, and certainly in those days, as with most sports, guys were just smaller.
Yeah.
But for a goalie, he was physically smaller than a lot of the guys he was playing against and with, but was one of the more effective goalies. And I think that's kind of a really interesting story about Grant. Plus, one of the very first prominent black players in the NHL.
Absolutely. And quite a story that Lisa and Grant will tell. They run a foundation in town and they'll tell that story too, which is pretty amazing.
And I've known Lisa for many years when I first moved to the Valley, and she is lovely and delightful, and she and Grant have really built something special. And I think Grant now kind of is really enjoying this second career, which he doesn't need.
Yeah. Well, no, he's a +2 handicap golfer. He could be out making money doing that.
I think he does spend a little time on a golf course.
He
I
does.
think it might be a co-owner of certainly an investor in one of the local courses. But yeah, that's going to be great fun because, coming off the inaugural season where our Firebirds damn near won the Calder Cup.
One
they
goal
scored
away.
more points in all of the 7 games.
Yeah.
If they had been distributed equally, we would have won.
1 goal away from winning the championship.
I think we need to change the rules.
Yeah.
I don't care how many points you scored during the game.
Actually, if we say it on this podcast, doesn't that make it so?
No.
Oh, so we couldn't just say the Firebirds won the championship?
No. No, that would just make us wrong, which wouldn't be the first time all season.
Hey, listen, we've only got a minute here, but I want to say personally that day that I looked at you at the bar and said, have you ever considered a...
Oh, no, that was a different day.
That was way after. Have you ever been interested in doing a podcast? Yes. Would you consider doing it with somebody else? Yes. Would you consider it with me?
I would still consider it with somebody else.
I do know. I do realize that I'm auditioning for the co-host position every single week here. But you know what? I think it makes me better.
No, this has been absolutely a pure passion project. It's so much fun. Skip has made it a lot of fun.
Yes.
And again, I think we owe a lot of credit to Skip for being an incredible first guest because people were like, okay, I know what Skip did, and I want to listen to this podcast. And then they'll be like, okay, now I want to listen to the next few guests just because we're running on Skip's coattails. So we really appreciate what he has done for us.
I want to thank everybody here at the bar that's been so wonderful to us, reserving our table every week. We've ended up with a couple of drinks and the best $9 cheeseburgers in the Valley.
No question about it.
Yeah. So you want to spend some time at Little Bar and have the buffalo bites too. Those are also wonderful. Patrick, I can't believe we get to do this, and we get to do it for at least one more year. Thanks for joining me on this.
Wait, it's a whole year? Are you sure about that?
6 months. How long is the season?
I don't know. It changes.
It's got to be 6 months.
It's got to be somewhere in there. No, and again, this is in large part the success, the listenership that we've garnered is thanks to John McMullen because he knows how to put it out on a platform and get people to come around and try it. And I think once they try it, they're at least interested because we get some really fascinating guests, and we love the guests that we've had on. We're so appreciative.
We do.
And we are looking forward to season 2, and we certainly hope that you are as well. And Randy, it's truly a pleasure. We were good friends before this started, and I think this.
Hey, we're still good friends.
We are still good friends. We just recently spent a whole weekend together, and we're still good friends.
And we're still good friends.
Maybe not as good as when it started, but look.
Well, Andrea and I are getting along much better.
Oh, you had some bridges to build there. So that's good news. That's great. No, this is terrific fun. So on behalf of John, on behalf of Randy, and our thanks to the team here at Little Bar, thank you to all of you who check this out on occasion, and we hope that you will do so in the coming second season. We promise just as interesting guests and a lot of fun and a lot of laughs right here on Big Conversations Little Bar. I'm Patrick Evans. Thanks for joining us.
And welcome.
Thanks for listening to Big Conversations Little Bar. Join Randy and Patrick next time as we keep the conversation going right here on Big Conversations Little Bar.